Hey guys, tonight we will drift somewhere cold and quiet, to a place where even your thoughts seem to crystallize like tiny snowflakes in the air. You are standing at the edge of the world, boots planted on a blue-white plain of ice that stretches farther than your sleepy eyes can see. Behind you, a small research station hums softly like a friendly spaceship parked in the snow, its windows glowing yellow against the polar twilight. Out here, the air is so clean it almost stings, and if you tried to stand in this cold without proper gear, you probably wouldn't survive this. But luckily, you're wrapped in a warm parka, and the story is doing all the walking for you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, drop a comment with your city and your local time so this frozen evening of ours can quietly connect with 100 other nights around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull your hood closer as the wind brushes past in a long, steady sigh. The snow beneath your boots squeaks softly, every step a reminder that you are walking on something old and deep. Behind you, the station windows glow a soft yellow, tiny squares of warmth pressed into the endless blue of the ice. Inside, tired scientists move between benches and humming machines, their shadows sliding across the glass in slow, familiar patterns. A researcher named Lena waves from the metal stairs, her breath puffing in pale clouds. She jerks her head toward the door in a friendly command to come inside. You take one last look at the horizon, where sky and snow blur together, then crunch your way toward her. The railing is cold beneath your glove, and as the door closes behind you with a muted thump, the outside wind becomes a distant, muffled rustle. Warm air wraps around you, smelling faintly of coffee, soup, and damp wool. Your glasses fog in an instant, turning the hallway into a glowing blur. Lena laughs quietly and places a tissue into your hand. Happens to everyone, she says. First night feels unreal. Give it a little time. It starts to feel like the strangest, coziest neighborhood you've ever lived in. You follow her along a narrow corridor lined with hooks and heavy parkas, each tagged with a name and a job. Ice chemist, drill tech, mechanic, cook. The floor vibrates with the steady thrum of generators. Out here you realize warmth isn't just a luxury, it's a shared project, tended as carefully as any experiment they run on the ice. In the common room, a few people sit around a scarred wooden table, hands wrapped around steaming mugs. A big map of the ice sheet fills most of one wall, dotted with pins and scribbled notes. Next to it, someone has taped a photo of a sunny beach, a bright square of turquoise water and palm trees that looks like it belongs to another universe. A deck of cards lies abandoned mid-game, frozen in its own tiny stalemate. The others greet you with quiet nods and small, tired smiles. Names float past: Nora, who fixes anything that buzzes or leaks; Timo, who jokes he spends more time talking to the drill than to people; Hassan, who cooks miracles out of canned food and frozen supplies. One of them slides a mug toward you. The heat seeps into your fingers as you cradle it, and for a moment you do nothing but sit and thaw. Lena steps to the map and taps a red pin lost in a sea of blue. She says, "That's us." Right now, you're sitting above ice that started falling as snow long before there were cities or clocks or weather apps to complain about. Tomorrow, you'll watch us pull a piece of it out of the ground like a rolled-up story. Tonight, your only job is to notice how heavy your eyelids are allowed to feel. You let your gaze wander over the room. Whiteboards lean against the wall, crowded with numbers and small graphs. In the margins, someone has drawn a penguin in safety goggles, a lopsided snowman, a cartoon drill with little arms. Boots stand drying along a vent. The hum of a fridge, the soft clink of a spoon, the occasional creak as the building shifts in the wind. Together, they weave into a low, steady background noise that your body instantly files under safe. At the far end, a narrow window is rimmed with frost that curls in delicate, fern-like patterns. Beyond the glass, night sits thick and quiet, the horizon smudged and soft. There are no car horns, no traffic lights, no phone screens reflecting in your eyes, just the slow breathing of the station and the vast, unworried presence of the ice holding its secrets somewhere far below your feet, while you sit here, warm and drowsy, learning how to listen. You wake to the clink of mugs somewhere down the corridor and lie still for a moment, listening to the low hum of generators and the faint rush of wind pressing against the walls. No traffic, no sirens, no phone buzzing on the nightstand. Just the steady sounds of a small station surrounded by a sheet of ice. You dress in layers, the fabric chilly at first, then slowly warming as you move. When you open your door, Lena is there already, puffy jacket half-zipped, wool hat pulled low. She offers you the thermos she's holding so you can steal a sip of coffee. "Ready?" she asks. Today, you meet the ice outside, not just the stuff we slice into little pieces. In the gear room, heavy boots line the floor like quiet, oversized animals. You choose a pair, stamp your feet into them, and cinch the straps until they hug your ankles. Hassan appears just long enough to tuck a wrapped biscuit into your pocket. For when you start asking big questions about the universe, he says, sugar helps. Then you step outside, and the world simplifies. The air is knife-sharp, so clean it almost tastes like nothing at all. Your breath appears in pale clouds. The station crouches behind you, a cluster of boxy buildings with antennas and cables. Beyond it, there is only white and sky, an enormous, silent circle stretching in every direction. A safety line runs away from the station like a straight pencil mark on a blank page. You clip your harness onto it, hear the small click of metal on metal, and feel an immediate, irrational sense of comfort. Lena checks the buckle, gives it a firm tug, then nods. Stay on the line, match my pace, and if anything looks weird under your feet, tell me before it becomes a story the next group tells. You follow her into the open. Your boots sink a little with each step and then push back, the snow making a faint squeaky crunch as if you're walking on styrofoam and sugar. It feels solid, like something that has been here for a long time and plans to stay. That's the thing most people don't really feel until they're standing out here, Lena says over her shoulder. This isn't just a flat, frozen parking lot. It's a stack of winters. Snow fell, it didn't melt. More snow fell on top. The weight pressed the old flakes tighter and tighter, squeezed out the gaps, and slowly turned soft snow into dense ice. The deeper you go, the older the winter was when it first landed. You picture it as you walk. Storm after storm drifting over this place long before there were satellites or weather apps, snow falling on empty land, then getting buried and pressed. Somewhere far below your boots, layers from mammoth days and stone tools still sit there, carrying tiny traces of the world they fell through. Lena waits for you to catch up so you can walk side by side. I like to think of the ice sheet as a librarian that never throws anything away, she says over her shoulder. Every snowfall is another page. Dust from a desert, ash from a distant volcano, salt from sea spray. It all falls with the snow and gets filed away. After tens of thousands of years, the library gets thick enough to stand on. The wind picks up, sliding past your hood with a low, steady sound. Ahead of you, thin stakes stick out of the snow, marking a safe route and hinting at places where the surface might hide cracks and crevices. Behind you, the station already looks smaller, like a toy set left on a blank white table. The line at your waist and Lena's casual, steady voice become your anchors. She stops, kneels, and scoops up a handful of loose snow. This is the newest entry in the archive, she says. Soft, full of air, easy to blow around. With time and pressure, it changes. The flakes fuse together. First it becomes fern, not really snow anymore, not quite ice. Deeper still, it's solid ice, and everything that once floated down from the sky is locked inside. You think of what that includes: soot from old campfires and modern factories, pollen from forests, smoke from wildfires, even traces of gases from the air itself. All of it slowly buried, year after year, until the surface you're walking on is just the top page of an extremely long book. Every few steps you take, Lena adds softly, you've crossed another year or two. Out here, the past isn't behind you, it's beneath you. She rises, brushes her gloves together, and starts walking again. You follow, feeling each crunch of your boots in a new way. You're not just crossing a flat field, you're moving over time that has been pressed into place, winter on winter, a frozen memory of the planet kept carefully underfoot, while you make your slow, careful way toward the place where that memory will be brought up into the light. You follow Lena toward the deeper hum that's been purring faintly through the station all morning, a low, patient vibration under the softer kitchen sounds. The corridor narrows, the air turns cooler and sharper, carrying the clean smell of metal and a thin trace of oil. At the end, a heavy door hesitates on its hinges, then swings open with a short, resigned groan. You step inside the drill tent, and it feels a little like walking into the chest of some sleeping machine. The walls are tall and made of thick fabric, billowing just slightly when gusts of wind push from outside. Lamps hang from metal beams, throwing bright, steady light over coils of cable, stacked pipes, and one central steel tower rising from a dark hole in the floor. The hum here is constant, but oddly gentle, like a huge cat dozing with one eye open. Timo stands at a control console beside the tower, shoulders wrapped in a bulky jacket, wool hat pulled low. A chipped mug balances next to a panel of glowing numbers. He looks up when you arrive and gives you a small, crooked smile. "Morning," he calls. "You're right on time to watch us bother a few ancient winters in the nicest way possible." Lena leads you to the railing that rings the shaft. Up close, you can see the cable running over pulleys at the top of the tower, disappearing straight down into the dark. "The real drill is far below us," she says. What's moving right now is a long, hollow barrel with teeth at the bottom. It spins, the teeth shave a ring of ice, and that ring slides up inside the barrel. When it's full, we bring the whole thing back up like a frozen elevator full of time. You glance at the screen beside Timo. One number shows depth far deeper than any staircase you've ever seen, and still climbing by tiny steps. Each extra meter means the cutters are meeting ice that started as snow when coastlines were drawn differently and not a single human on Earth thought about carbon dioxide in parts per million. Your gloved fingers curl around the cold rail. The metal carries a faint vibration, as if the tower is humming under its breath. Somewhere far below, the drill is slowly spiraling down through stacked winters, passing the level where last year's storms are pressed flat, then the level where your childhood winters are stored, then layers that were old long before your family tree even sprouted. People always picture something dramatic, like the drill is dropping into a glowing crystal cave. Really, it's just a steady spinning and shaving and waiting. The ice sheet is calm. We try to match its mood. You listen to the low whir of the winch, the quiet clink of tools, the soft hiss of someone's breath inside a scarf. The rhythm is slow and even, and your own breathing starts to fall in with it. In as the cable pays out as the numbers creep upward. It feels less like a risky operation and more like a very careful conversation with the planet. "Barrel's full," Timo murmurs. He nudges the controls and the pitch of the hum shifts as the winch reverses. On the screen, the depth number begins to slide gently downward. Somewhere under your boots, the long barrel is climbing back up its narrow tunnel, carrying whatever it has just collected in its hollow center. Lena nudges your arm. "Come on," she says. "Let's go meet the new arrival." At the far end of the rig, a long plastic-lined trough waits like a cradle at the foot of a hospital bed. You stand beside it as the upper part of the drill string emerges from the shaft, rim frosted in delicate white crystals. Two technicians move in, quiet and focused, clipping clamps and guiding the heavy metal horizontal with small economical gestures. You get the sense that no one here wastes words or movements. Everything is slow, careful, and slightly sleepy. A latch clicks. Hinges tilt. The barrel opens with a soft metallic sigh, like someone exhaling after holding their breath for a very long time. For a heartbeat, there's only cold air and a thin haze of frost. Then a pale cylinder of ice slides out and settles into the trough with a gentle, solid sound. You step closer. The core is about as wide as your spread hand, just over a meter long. Under the bright lamps, it looks simple at first, just blue-white ice. But the longer you look, the more it changes. Faint bands cross it like soft pencil lines. Some layers are cloudy, some clearer, some dusted with tiny specks. Minuscule bubbles glint inside when you move your head, like scattered stars trapped in glass. This piece comes from just over 2,000 meters down, roughly 100,000 years old, before cities, before writing, before anyone could complain about the weather online. The ice doesn't shimmer or glow or do anything special. It simply exists, quiet and solid, carrying within itself the seasons of a world that never heard an engine, never saw a streetlight. Ash from distant eruptions, dust from far-off deserts, salt from spray blown off ancient seas, tiny pockets of old air, all of them layered and pressed together in this one cold cylinder that you can almost wrap your arms around. Timo leans in to inspect it, eyes narrowing a little. "No fractures," he says. "Nice clean core. Time is in a cooperative mood today." A labeled container appears. Careful hands slide the core inside and close the lid with the tenderness of someone putting away something fragile and irreplaceable. Soon it will move to darker, colder rooms where saws, microscopes, and quiet computers will pull even more secrets from it. Already, another empty barrel is being screwed together nearby, the bright threads of metal shining for a moment before they disappear into the long, assembled tube. Outside the tent, wind keeps combing the surface of the ice sheet smooth, erasing footprints and tiny disturbances like a patient editor. Inside, under the steady lights, you've just watched the planet hand you one slim frozen page of its memory. It rests for a moment in its cradle, silent and self-contained, while the drill prepares to go down again and bring up the next line in the story. You help guide the boxed core back toward the main building with Lena and Timo, each of you holding a corner of the sled as it hisses over the packed snow. The air still pinches any exposed skin, but now you move with the calm of someone who knows the rules. Hood up, gloves on, keep walking. Above, the sky is pale and thin, the sun a smudged coin behind cloud, and against that emptiness the station looks almost homely, a cluster of sturdy boxes and chimneys tucked into the white. Your boots crunch up the ramp, the sled bumping softly behind you. When the door opens, warmth rushes out, your glasses fog into milk, and the outside world shrinks to a strip of cold air around your ankles before the door closes again. Somewhere down the hall, something metal clinks, and a machine gives a single polite beep, as if ticking your name off a list. "This way," Lena says, steering the sled past the common room toward a plain door marked in block letters, "Cold Lab." Someone has drawn a lopsided snowflake in the corner of the sign, a small reminder that chill in here is not a bug, it's a feature. She swipes her badge. The lock clicks, and a thin river of cooler air slips out into the hallway and wraps around your legs. Inside, the light is bright and shadowless. The room is long and narrow, lined with metal benches, cables, and quiet machines. Freezer doors stand along one wall, each labeled with numbers and letters that look like coordinates to buried treasure. The air is cold enough that you can see a faint trace of your breath, but after the open ice, it feels almost gentle, more library than blizzard. At the central table, a scientist in a thick cardigan and fingerless gloves looks up from her screen. Her hair is gathered into a messy bun pinned together with a pencil. "You must be the new set of eyes," she says, pushing her chair back. "I'm May. I teach people how to read ice like a diary, except the handwriting is awful and nobody believed in punctuation." Lena and Timo lift the box onto the table with a soft thud. You step closer, feeling the cooler air slide against your cheeks. May flips the latches and opens the lid. There it is again, the core you watched rise out of the drill tower, now lying in a shallow trough at eye level. No roaring winch, just quiet light and your own slow breathing. Up close, it looks plain and serious in a way that makes it more impressive. The cylinder is about as wide as your spread hand, a little over a meter long. Faint bands cross it from end to end like soft pencil strokes. Some sections are cloudy, some clearer, and tiny bubbles are scattered throughout. When you tilt your head, the bubbles catch the light in quick flashes, like distant stars trapped in glass. May lays a flexible measuring tape along the length of the core. "Depth marker, check," she murmurs. "Segment label, check. No obvious fractures. Good. the past is behaving today. She glances at you. Come closer. You're not going to hurt it by staring. That part is our job. You lean in until your breath thogs gently against your scarf. May taps a darker, cloudier stripe. This is probably a winter layer, she says. Around here, winter snow traps more fine dust in tiny particles. The clearer band above it is likely a calmer summer. One cloudy stripe plus one clearer stripe is often 1 year. So what you're seeing is a stack of birthdays for the planet, not for us. Your eyes follow the rhythm along the core. Cloudy, clear. Cloudy, clear. Winter, summer. Noisy year, quiet year. A storm here, a calm there. All of it pressed together inside this one cylinder that if you were trusted with it, you could cradle in both arms like a rolled-up story. Outside, wind is still combing fresh snow over the paths you walked this morning, quietly erasing the marks of your boots. Inside, on the snow-lit table, the old footsteps of the planet, storms and calms, eruptions and stillness, remain written in faint stripes that refuse to fade. The core lies there, unbothered by your curiosity, while you feel the strange, sleepy privilege of being one of the very few people who will ever stare this closely at 100,000 winters lined up in a row. May lets the silence hang for a moment, then taps one of the sparkling pinpricks in the core. Layers tell you when things happened, she says softly. These little guys tell you what the air was like when it did. Her gloved finger hovers just above a cluster of bubbles, each only a fraction of a millimeter across. This is the part where we basically ask the ice, "What were you breathing back then?" You look closer. The bubbles are tiny, perfect spheres and ovals, floating inside the ice like a scatter of frozen soap bubbles. They're not just pretty accidents, they're pockets, actual pieces of atmosphere that wandered over this place, got trapped in falling snow, and then were quietly locked away while glaciers shifted and coastlines moved, and humans eventually invented reality shows. So, those are air? You ask, your voice sounding small in the bright, cold lab. May smiles. Yep, old air. Really old in this segment. Some of these bubbles were sealed back when mammoths were just out there doing their mammoth thing. We can't pop one and let you sniff it. You probably wouldn't survive this, lab safety-wise, and I'd definitely fail my next inspection. But we can measure what's inside. She walks to a neighboring bench and gestures for you to follow. Here, a squat metal machine squats on rubber feet, cables and tubes trailing from its sides like tidy vines. Clear plastic lines feed into small glass flasks. A vacuum pump murmurs somewhere under the table with a steady, sleepy purr. This, May says, patting the box, is one of our ways of getting the bubbles to talk. Not literally, that would be weird even for us. We cut a small piece of core, weigh it, put it in a sealed chamber, suck out today's air, and then break or melt the ice so the trapped bubbles escape into a tiny enclosed space. Whatever gas we collect, that's ancient atmosphere. Same air, new container. You watch as she retrieves a short length of core that's already been sampled and logged. 2 quick, precise moves with a saw inside a safety shield, and a small cylinder of ice lands on a scale. She notes the mass, then places the piece into a glass chamber with a thick lid. The lid settles with a soft clink. Metal clamps swing into place like gentle, determined arms. Step 1, she says, flipping a switch. A pump starts to whine quietly, pulling modern lab air out of the chamber. A gauge needle creeps downward. We're really good at contaminating things, May adds. Every breath, every open door, every leaky gasket. So we ask our own air to leave before we invite the old stuff to the party. You glance back at the core on the main table. All those bubbles, every one a tiny room full of air from some past sky, waiting for someone to knock politely. Here, above the pump's murmur, time feels strangely stacked. Your warm breath in this moment, the building's recycled air, and then much older sky sealed in the ice, all occupying the same room without ever quite touching. The gauge steadies. May checks a second dial, then nods. Okay, now for the satisfying part. She presses another button. Inside the chamber, a small metal rod descends. You hear a faint crackle, the delicate sound of ice breaking. For a heartbeat, you imagine all the bubbles sighing out at once, old air spilling into the empty space like a crowd released from a frozen stadium. We give it a moment to mingle, she says. Then we send a sample through this line, she traces one clear tube with her finger, into our analyzer. That's where we meet the numbers. You follow the line to a second machine, this one with a small screen already blinking awake. A progress bar crawls along, unhurried. On a nearby shelf, Hassan has somehow slipped in and left a mug for each of you, steam curling gently in the chilled hair. You wrap your fingers around yours and feel the warmth soak through your gloves, like a small personal greenhouse in the middle of all this managed cold. Right now, May continues, the analyzer is measuring gases like carbon dioxide and methane in that ancient air sample. We know what the concentration is in today's atmosphere. We compare the two, and suddenly that little piece of ice isn't just pretty, it's a data point in a long, long story. Numbers begin to appear on the screen, stabilizing slowly. May jots them down on a pad, then turns the page to show you printed graphs taped there, jagged lines rising and falling across thousands of years. Some sections look like soft waves, others spike sharply as if the planet took a series of quick, uneven breaths. In colder times, she explains, tapping a lower section of the graph, we usually see lower carbon dioxide. During warmer intervals, it rises. The ice cores show that dance over and over, ice ages breathing out, interglacial periods breathing in. Then, very recently, by ice standards, we see this. Her finger slides to a part of the graph where one line shoots upward like a startled cat. You don't need labels to know that part is closer to your own lifetime than to mammoths. It doesn't match the gentle rhythm of the older cycles at all. It looks like someone swapped playlists halfway through the song. We'll talk more about that later, May says softly, almost as if she can feel your shoulders tense under the layers. For now, just remember, those bubbles you saw trapped in the core are how we know what the air was like before we started adding so much to it. The ice doesn't take sides, it just records. The machine beeps, politely this time, like a very calm oven. May notes the final values and starts the process of venting the chamber. Somewhere behind you, a freezer door opens and closes with a cushioned thump, more old cores settling into their numbered slots. Outside, snow keeps sliding down from a high, indifferent sky, adding new layers on top of all the buried ones. You sip your drink and imagine holding a single bubble between your fingers, not as tiny ice, but as a miniature time capsule. Inside, air that brushed past ancient seas, across dry grass where big animals grazed, under skies without city lights. Now that same air has been coaxed into a modern instrument and turned into a line on a graph that you can read with your sleepy present-day eyes. It feels oddly intimate, like reading someone else's diary with their full permission. The planet has been writing this record in snow and ice for longer than your species has had a word for history. Tonight, in this bright, humming room, surrounded by quiet people who treat each core like a fragile memory, you've just watched one of those sentences breathe out of the ice and onto a screen. Later, when the last numbers from the gas analyzer are logged and the machines settle back into their soft electronic breathing, May wheels over a different table on quiet casters. This one is covered in thin, precise slices of ice, each laid on a strip of dark foam to keep them from sliding. Overhead, the lighting is gentler, and a long light box glows faintly from beneath a sheet of frosted glass. "Okay," she says, tugging her cardigan sleeves down over her wrists. "You've met the bubbles. Now let's teach your eyes to see more than white stuff when you look at the ice." She pats the nearest slice, which looks like nothing more than a clean, narrow beam of frozen water. Think of this as the handwriting, messy but readable. She invites you to stand on the other side of the table, so you're facing her with the light box between you. One by one, she lifts slices of ice onto the glowing surface. Under the backlighting, details bloom. What was dull white becomes a subtle landscape. Streaks and smudges, faint, smoky bands, tiny grains that catch the light just a little differently. "Remember how we talked about winters and summers?" she asks. "Dustier, cloudier layers, then clearer ones? Now we're going to zoom in. This is where we stop asking cold or warm and start asking what kind of chaos was the sky dealing with that year." She slides the first slice toward you and places a magnifying visor in your hands. You settle it over your head, the plastic resting lightly on your forehead. When you lean in, the ice fills your vision. Tiny grains of something darker than the ice lie scattered in a thin band, like pepper on snow. Elsewhere, the ice looks cleaner, almost glassy with only a few scattered flecks. "Dust from deserts," May says, reading your hesitation. "When big winds blow over dry places, they pick up fine particles and carry them ridiculous distances. Some of it ends up falling here with the snow. Over time, you get thicker dust layers in certain intervals. That tells us when the world was drier in some regions, or windier, or both." You try to imagine it. Storms raging over faraway plains you've never seen, grit lofted into the sky, and then drifting across oceans to land gently in this frozen emptiness. On the surface, it was just another quiet snowfall. Down here, that desert dust is a bookmark in the story. She pulls that slice aside and replaces it with another, slightly darker one. This time, the band isn't just dusty, it's peppered with tiny, irregular bits that look black against the glow. "Combustion products," she says. In plain language, things that burned. Some of this is from natural wildfires. Forests catch, grasslands flare, smoke rises. Tiny soot particles ride the air currents, and some of them end up in the snow. We call it black carbon. It loves the ice so much that it sinks in and stays. You followed the jagged band with your eyes. The idea that a fire in some distant forest, trees crackling, animals fleeing, hot air roiling above the flames, could leave a faint scar in this core feels both unsettling and beautiful. That crackling chaos is now a thin stripe that you can only see because someone bothered to look for it. Later on, these kinds of layers get a boost from human activity. As people burn more fuel, wood, coal, oil, you start seeing more of this black carbon more consistently. The ice doesn't tell you who lit the match. It just notes that something burned again and again. Another slice replaces the last. This one has a narrower, more sharply defined band, almost metallic under the light, edged by a subtle change in texture. Volcanic eruption, May says, before you can ask. Big one, most likely. When a major volcano blows, it tosses ash and sulfur compounds high into the atmosphere. Some particles fall out quickly, others spread across the globe. Here, the sulfate and ash show up as these distinctive layers, and when we match them with historical records or tree rings, we can sometimes say, oh, that stripe is this eruption. You picture a mountain tearing itself open, ash billowing into the sky, people hundreds or thousands of kilometers away looking up at a dimmer sun. Then snow falls on this ice sheet, the ash and sulfate mixed in. Now that storm of rock and fire is just a quiet line preserved at a depth where no one would ever see it, unless they drilled. For a long time, May continues, stories about years without summer or dim suns sounded almost mythical. Then we saw the matching volcanic signatures in ice cores: ash, sulfate, timing. The ice was like, yeah, that happened. Here's the receipt. She replaces the slice again. This time the layer she points to is faint, just a slightly hazier region in what otherwise looks like clean ice. Sometimes the signal is subtle. Not every event leaves a bold underline. That's where we use chemistry and more sensitive instruments. But even with just your eyes, you can learn to see the difference between quiet years and noisy ones. You feel a flicker of doubt. How can you possibly keep all these patterns straight? Dust means dryness somewhere, soot means fire, sharp bands mean volcanic tantrums, and that's before you even get to the bubbles and their gases. It's like being handed a stack of ancient letters in a language you barely speak. May notices the tiny frown crease your forehead above the visor. Hey, she says gently, nobody wakes up one day able to read this fluently. The ice isn't trying to make it easy, it's just being honest. Start with simple questions. Is this layer more dusty or less than the one above it? Does that band look sharper or fuzzier? Do you see more black specks here or there? Once you can answer those, the rest builds slowly. She pushes one of the earlier slices back under the light and taps a particular patch. Try this. Tell me what you see. No right answers. You lean in. The band she has indicated is darker than the surrounding ice, but not as sharp as the obvious volcanic stripe. The grains are smaller and more numerous than in the wildfire layer, and you think you spot a faint change in the bubble pattern. More dust than up here, you say slowly, tracing a finger just above the ice, but not as much black carbon as the fire band. Maybe a very dusty year, windy, drier somewhere? May's eyes crinkle above her scarf. Exactly the kind of thinking we want. Not, I know the exact cause, but something changed and I can tell how. You're learning to ask the ice good questions. That's half the work. You stay there for a while, moving from slice to slice, eyes adjusting, brain gradually sorting the subtle textures. Outside the lab, time continues at its usual distracted pace, emails stacking up somewhere far away, traffic lights cycling through colors, people checking weather apps that will forget today's forecast by next week. In here, under the soft glow of the light box, you're learning to read a slower, deeper script. Desert winds, volcanic winters, distant forest fires, all of them leave their signatures in these pale stripes. The cores don't raise their voices, they just lie there, quietly legible to anyone who's willing to stand still long enough to notice. And as your tired eyes grow a little sharper in the cold, you feel the strange, calm satisfaction of realizing that yes, with a bit of guidance, you can actually read what this frozen library has been patiently shelving for tens of thousands of years. After dinner, the station feels like it is exhaling. The drill has gone quiet, the cold lab door is closed, and you follow Lena and May into a dim room where most of the light comes from screens. Outside, the wind pushes at the walls. Inside, the air hums with fans and electronics. On the biggest monitor, two soft-colored lines wander across a black background like distant hills seen at night. Lena drops into a rolling chair and spins toward the display. This is what all those cores become when we add them up, she says. You met the ice face to face, now you see its memory stretched out in time. She pats the back of the chair beside her so you can sit close enough that the graph fills your view. May leans against a desk, hands wrapped around a mug. Every point on those lines comes from the cores, she explains. We measure isotopes that tell us about temperature, bubbles that tell us about greenhouse gases, dust that hints at deserts and storms. One measurement is a word. Thousands of them make a paragraph. Hundreds of thousands make a very, very long story. You squint at the main screen. One pale line rolls up and down in broad curves. Just below it, a darker line follows almost the same path, dipping when the first dips, climbing when it climbs. The pattern repeats over and over. Deep troughs, high ridges, gentle slopes between them. It looks less like random noise, more like someone's slow, steady breathing. Top line is a temperature proxy, Lena says, tracing a long, low valley with her finger. Colder here, warmer up here. Her hand drops to the second line. This one is carbon dioxide from those bubbles you met. They are not perfect twins, but they like to travel together. You watch the curves and see it. When one slumps, the other is low. When one rises, the other follows. Those big swings are ice ages, and the milder intervals between them, May adds. During the long cold phases, huge ice sheets spread over the continents, seas dropped, coastlines moved. During the warmer intervals, the ice pulled back and sea level rose again. Changes in Earth's orbit nudged the sunlight around, and the ice, oceans, and atmosphere answer slowly over tens of thousands of years. Your eyes trace one deep trough from left to right. Small marks along the bottom show times when the ice sheets were at their largest. You imagine kilometers of ice sitting where highways and fields exist now. The world colder, drier, louder with creaking glaciers. Then you follow the curve upward into a warm phase and picture forests spreading, animals migrating, rivers carving new paths through softer ground. Without quite meaning to, you draw an invisible box around the core of the graph in your mind. The peaks reach up, but not beyond a certain height. The troughs sink, but not endlessly downward. For hundreds of thousands of years, the lines swing inside that band, sometimes stretching it, never smashing it. The whole pattern feels like a pendulum that likes its middle, even when it strays. Lena taps a key, and another faint line appears, this one from ocean sediments. It dips low when the temperature line is low and rises during the warm intervals. Different archives, same rhythm, she says. From another desk, Timo mutters that it is like binge-watching the planet's old seasons. You smile despite yourself. On the graph, each full swing from deep cold to warm and back again takes tens of thousands of years. Whole civilizations could rise and fall inside one of those slow slopes. From the ice's point of view, these are not sudden disasters, they are long mood shifts. Snow patterns change, ice grows or shrinks, greenhouse gases lean lower or higher as the system moves. Climate has always had motion, May says, quietly. It was never a flat, perfectly calm line waiting for us. Before we talk about what humans have added in the latest pages, we have to understand this background rhythm. She nods at the screen where the curves drift on, utterly unconcerned with the small group of tired people watching them from a warm room in the snow. You stand there with them in the blue glow, listening to the fans and the distant wind and the faint click of keys. The lines on the wall rise and fall like a drawn-out heartbeat, and you feel your own chest follow, breathing a little slower, a little deeper. Outside, tonight's snow settles on top of all the older layers. In here, the ancient pattern those layers hold plays on in quiet light. You're still staring at the slow breathing of those lines on the screen when Hassan slips in, ghost-like, in his socks, balancing a tray. Steam curls up from mismatched mugs, carrying the smell of tea and something faintly spicy. He sets the tray on a nearby table with the exaggerated care of a man who's learned the hard way what spilled drinks and expensive electronics can do to friendships. "Intermission," he whispers. "You've been watching Ice Ages like a box set. Time for a human side plot." You wrap your hands around a mug. The warmth seeps into your fingers and wrists, the heat a small reminder that you do, in fact, possess blood and bones, and not just graphs and parkas. On the wall, the pale lines still slide up and down, tracing glacial advances and retreats like a long, patient melody. "So," you say, watching one of the curves climb into a mild, warm interval, "where do we show up in all this?" May tilts her head, considering the graph as if she's looking for a good entrance cue. "Depends how you define we," she says. "Our species has been around for a couple 100,000 years. That's already a chunk of these swings. But if you mean people with campfires and stories and bad decisions and clever tools, those humans, then we start stepping into the frame more clearly during and after the last big glacial period." Lena taps a key, and a faint vertical band appears on the graph, covering the most recent cycles. "Imagine," she says, "you're standing halfway through one of those long, cold troughs. Ice sheets thousands of meters thick sit on what will one day be cities. Sea level is so low that land bridges connect places we only cross by plane now. Your world is wind, snow, migrating herds, and the occasional hungry predator. No one has invented spreadsheets yet, so in some ways it's simpler. You sip your tea and let the image settle. A wide, dry, chilly landscape, grasses whispering under a huge sky, herds of animals moving like living weather, and small groups of humans following, wrapped in fur and smoke, laughing, arguing, trying to keep children from eating mysterious berries. Somewhere, someone is making a very questionable spear design decision, and their friends are politely not commenting. The ice remembers them indirectly, May says. Not their names or their jokes, but their fires. As humans spread into these colder landscapes, they carried fire with them. Campfires, grassland burns, later deliberate clearing of brush. In the cores, that shows up as more of those tiny black carbon particles you saw earlier, little soot grains tucked into the snow. On another screen, she pulls up a zoomed-in section of soot measurements from recent glacial times. The line jitters gently, sometimes a little higher than before, a heartbeat of distant flames. Part of this is natural fire, she continues. But as people grow in number and range, they start to shape where and when things burn. The planet has had wildfires forever. Humans add intention to the chaos. Hassan sinks into a chair and stretches his legs out, the picture of a man who's mastered the art of listening and almost napping at the same time. Think about someone 30,000 years ago, standing on an icy plain. They're using fire to scare animals, to keep warm, to cook. They look up at the sky and have no idea that a grain of soot from their fire will end up inside an ice layer we're measuring now. If you told them, they'd probably offer you more soup and assume you'd hit your head. You can almost see it. A ring of people leaning toward a fire, faces orange and flickering, behind them the cold darkness of a world with no electric lights. Smoke rises, carries bits of their evening into the sky, and some of those bits ride the wind for days before sinking gently into snowfall far away. One small decision, light the fire here, now, ends up as a faint, measurable change that you, sitting in this station with your mug, can detect tens of thousands of years later. Lena switches views again. Now you see a different graph, tiny wiggles in methane and carbon dioxide during the calmer, warmer stretch after the last big ice age, when the giant ice sheets retreated and seas crept inland like very patient thieves. This warm interval is the one we live in, she says, the Holocene. Ice pulled back, climate stabilized a bit, and humans started trying new things. Instead of only chasing food, they began growing it, clearing patches of forest, flooding fields, taming plants and animals that had no idea they'd signed up for full-time work. May points to subtle shifts in the lines. We see signs in the cores and in lake sediments, she says. Changes in pollen from wild plants to domesticated crops. Methane levels nudging up in ways that line up suspiciously well with early rice paddies and wet farming. You could say the planet was still dancing to its orbital rhythm, but humans started adding their own percussion track. You sip your tea and let the image settle. A wide, dry, chilly landscape, grasses whispering under a huge sky, herds of animals moving like living weather, and small groups of humans following, wrapped in fur and smoke, laughing, arguing, trying to keep children from eating mysterious berries. Somewhere, someone is making a very questionable spear design decision, and their friends are politely not commenting. None of this was deliberate climate engineering, Hassan says, lifting his mug. They were just trying not to starve. Should we invent agriculture and accidentally tweak atmospheric chemistry over centuries was not on the agenda. You laugh softly, the sound lost in the fan noise. The graph in front of you zooms out again, pulling those early human wiggles back into the long pattern of ice ages and warm phases. Against that backdrop, the first fires, farms, and flooded fields look modest, like someone humming along under a loudly playing song. Still, they're there, tiny fingerprints on a very old surface. What the cores tell us, May says, voice low and steady, is that humans started interacting with the climate system long before we built power plants or filled highways with engines. At first, our impact was small, local, spread thin in time. But the record is clear. As soon as we had tools and fire and curiosity, we were never completely quiet guests. You sit back, letting your eyes blur slightly, so the lines on the screen become soft shapes of light. Outside, fresh snow is piling on the roof, adding another thin sheet to the stack under your boots. Inside, you're sipping tea while three modern humans, wrapped in fleece and glowing screens, tell stories about older humans wrapped in fur and firelight. The ice, patient and unbothered, has watched all of it. At some point in the evening, after tea and a brief detour to argue over whose slippers are the warmest, you find yourself back in the data room with Lena. Most of the station has gone quiet, the drill is sleeping, the kitchen is dark, and only a couple of windows still glow faintly down the corridor. Outside, the wind has settled into a low, steady rush, like the ocean pretending to be air. On the big screen, the long, gentle waves of ice ages and warm periods still drift by, like slow music. But now, Lena has zoomed in on a smaller stretch of time, and the lines no longer look smooth and polite. They look jumpy, jagged. The climate's handwriting has suddenly developed a twitch. "Okay," she says, spinning her chair a little too far and correcting herself with a foot on the floor. "You've met the big picture rhythm, the ice ages, the warm intervals. That's the one people like to draw on posters. But if you look closer, the climate sometimes stumbles." She taps a key. The graph zooms tighter until one sharp spike nearly fills the screen, shooting upward in a way that makes your stomach clench just a little. It's like watching someone's heartbeat monitor suddenly jump. "This," she says quietly, "is a rapid warming event. In this case, in the North Atlantic region, temperatures jumped several degrees in just a few decades, maybe even less. That's ice core language for very fast, even if it still outpaces your group chat drama." You lean closer. Before the spike, the line is low and fairly steady, cold, stable, predictable in its own chilly way. Then suddenly, it shoots up. No gentle slope, no slow hesitation, just a sharp rise like someone flicked a switch. "What happened?" you ask, voice louder than you meant it to be in the dim room. Lena shrugs one shoulder, the gesture small under her fleece. "A combination of things. Changes in ocean circulation, shifts in ice sheets, maybe fresh meltwater gumming up the usual currents. The climate system is a web. Tug the right strand hard enough, and things can reorganize quickly. We call these abrupt climate events, That's scientists speak for the system changed its mind faster than we thought it could. On another monitor, she pulls up a simplified map, currents winding through the oceans, arrows looping around, warm and cold colors swirling like a slow lava lamp. She highlights a thick current moving northward in the Atlantic. This conveyor helps move heat around the planet, she says. If too much fresh water from melting ice pours in here, it can weaken or shift. That messes with where heat goes, how air moves, who gets storms, who gets droughts. You think back to the ice slice with the volcanic layer, the dust bands, the soot. Now the oceans join the cast, tugging on the atmosphere, nudging the ice, rearranging weather patterns like furniture. The whole system suddenly seems less like a calm, predictable machine and more like a very large, very moody roommate. Lena notices your expression. Remember, she says gently, this is all still in the past. We're reading what already happened. During some of these abrupt events, ecosystems had to scramble. Forests shifted, animals migrated or disappeared. People changed where they lived and how they survived. The ice cores show the speed and scale of those changes. They also show that the system has thresholds, points where a little extra push can lead to a big, quick response. The word threshold hangs in the air like a step you can't quite see in the dark. May appears in the doorway, hugging a sweater around herself. "You're showing the cliff jumps?" she asks, stepping inside. "Just the gentle ones first. We're easing into existential dread. It's a bedtime show, not a panic podcast." May chuckles and walks over, eyes flicking across the spike. You see that big jump, and it's tempting to imagine every living thing flipping a table at the same time. But even sudden climate events have texture. Some regions change more than others, some communities adapt, others struggle. The ice tells us the shape of the temperature shift. Archaeology, sediments, and other records help fill in what it felt like on the ground. She taps another key, and below the main spike, a smaller, messier graph appears, dust, methane, and other proxies dancing up and down as the temperature line leaps. In one section, the dust spikes too, hinting at stronger winds or drier regions. In another, methane bumps up, suggestive of wetlands adjusting, ecosystems shifting into new patterns. The climate system has a few favorite configurations: cold but relatively stable, warm and fairly stable, and then sometimes it tries on an in-between outfit and realizes, nope, this doesn't work, and abruptly snaps into something else. Those snaps are what you're looking at now. You stare at the spike until the sharp line almost blurs. So, these sudden jumps, they happened without us. No factories, no highways? Correct, May says. They came from natural triggers, changes in sunlight patterns, ice sheet dynamics, volcanic activity, the whole complicated orchestra. That's important because it tells us what the system is capable of doing all on its own before we add our modern influence. The ice is basically showing us, here are the tricks I already know. There's a small comfort in that. This isn't a fragile, glassy world that only started wobbling once humans arrived. It's an older, tougher system that has been lurching and recovering for a long time. At the same time, the idea that it can shift briskly on its own doesn't exactly tuck you in and sing lullabies. As if reading your mind, Lena swivels her chair to face you fully. "Here's what helps me sleep," she says. "These abrupt events show that the climate system has thresholds, yes, but they also show something else: information. By studying them, by understanding how fast the temperature changed, how oceans and ice responded, we learn where some of the tripwires might be. We can't unbuild the system's capacity for surprise, but we can stop walking around in it with our eyes closed. Think of those bubbles you saw earlier, May adds. You probably wouldn't survive this if you had to guess ancient air just by vibes. But with data, with cores, you can reconstruct it. Same with abrupt change. The more we know about past flips, the better we can estimate how close we might be to similar thresholds now, or how to back away from them. On the screen, Lena pulls back the zoom slightly. The sharp spike shrinks, joining others like it, less dramatic now that you see them in context, but still clearly out of step with the smoother background rhythm. They're not the whole song, but they're not rare either. You sit there in the blue glow, feeling the familiar tug between unease and understanding. Yes, the climate can jerk itself into a different state faster than seems polite. Yes, that has shaken living worlds before. But also, yes, the ice recorded it, quietly, in detail, and now a group of humans in warm socks and too much caffeine is decoding those notes. Outside, fresh snow is falling on the roof, unbothered by your questions. Inside, you're watching the record of ancient crises roll past on the screen, not as horror, but as information, warnings and lessons written in frozen water by a planet that never meant to hide them. You breathe out and feel your shoulders drop a little, accepting that part of tonight's lullaby is the reminder that the world beneath your dreams is complicated, capable of sudden change, and still, somehow, legible if you look closely enough. The next afternoon, after a few hours of helping Timo coil cable and pretending you understand his jokes about temperamental steel worms, May finds you with your jacket half-zipped and a cookie halfway to your mouth. She taps the cookie, then the hallway toward the lab. Fuel first, then ghosts of volcanoes, she says. Come on, I want to show you the loudest stripes in our quiet ice. You follow her back into the cold lab, air turning crisp as the door closes behind you. The light box is already on, the frosted panel glowing like a captured piece of cloudy sky. On the table, several slender slices of ice cores wait on their foam cradles, each one neatly labeled. Beside them lies a binder so thick it could double as an emergency doorstop. Today's theme, May announces, pulling on her fingerless gloves, is the years the sky forgot how to be normal. She lifts the first slice onto the light box. At once, the details sharpen. Fine textures, tiny bubbles, soft gradients of white and blue. She slides it toward you and points to a narrow, sharply defined band running through the metal. It's darker than the layers around it, almost smoky, with a dusting of tiny specks that sparkle under the light like powdered charcoal. Volcanic fallout, she says. Ash and sulfate from a big eruption somewhere far away. Not just a little local burp, but a proper planet-wide announcement. She flips open the binder to a marked page and turns it toward you. On one side, a graph shows sulfate levels spiking in the same part of the core you're looking at. On the other, a short paragraph summarizes a known eruption date, a volcano you dimly remember from school, and notes about unusual atmospheric dimming recorded by people who were probably just trying to get through their harvest. You picture it, a mountain tearing itself open, sending a column of ash high into the sky, stones and fire close by, but far away, just a gray haze slowly wrapping itself around the planet. Weeks later, snow begins to fall on this remote ice sheet, carrying with it microscopic fragments of that eruption. The snow seems ordinary at the time, just another storm, but in the core it becomes a thin, dark sentence. This happened. May gently taps the band. When this ash settled on the ice, she murmurs, nobody here saw the eruption. They just noticed strange sunsets, maybe, or a colder summer. The ice doesn't record their feelings about it, just the chemistry, the dust, the sulfate. But when we match this stripe with tree rings, with lake sediments, with written accounts of weirdly dark skies, the story gets texture. She flips open the binder to a marked page and turns it toward you. On one side, a graph shows sulfate levels spiking in the same part of the core you're looking at. On the other, a short paragraph summarizes a known eruption date, a volcano you dimly remember from school, and notes about unusual atmospheric dimming recorded by people who were probably just trying to get through their harvest. You picture it, a mountain tearing itself open, sending a column of ash high into the sky, stones and fire close by, but far away, just a gray haze slowly wrapping itself around the planet. Weeks later, snow begins to fall on this remote ice sheet, carrying with it microscopic fragments of that eruption. The snow seems ordinary at the time, just another storm, but in the core it becomes a thin, dark sentence. This happened. May gently taps the band. When this ash settled on the ice, she murmurs, nobody here saw the eruption. They just noticed strange sunsets, maybe, or a colder summer. The ice doesn't record their feelings about it. Just the chemistry, the dust, the sulfate. But when we match this stripe with tree rings, with lake sediments, with written accounts of weirdly dark skies, the story gets texture. She replaces the slice with another, this one carrying an even thicker, messier band. Under the light, the layer glows a murky gray, full of specks that seem to clump together. Stronger eruption, she says. More stuff launched into the stratosphere, more particles hanging around to bounce sunlight back into space. After events like this, the world can get noticeably cooler for a year or two. Crops fail, storm patterns shift. People write about the year summer never came and complain in whatever the 6th century version of a group chat was. You bend closer. The band looks like a scar, darker and denser than the others. It's unsettling and beautiful at the same time. Chaos turned into a quiet stripe. May flips a few pages in the binder and taps a short excerpt someone has reproduced from an old chronicle. Scribes describing a dim sun, a cold season, odd colors in the sky. We can't always be certain which eruption they were seeing, but when the timing lines up, this layer in the ice, those observations in the text, we get a little shiver. The ice is basically whispering, yes, I remember that one too. Another slice goes on the light box. This time the volcanic layer is thinner, but still distinct. Around it, the ice looks almost untouched, clear and faintly blue. The eruption might have been smaller or farther away, a quieter tantrum in the long history of the planet's molten moods. Not every volcano writes in bold marker, May says. Some just underline a year or two, enough to dim sunsets, to make people tell stories about red moons and pale suns. In the cores, those years show up as modest spikes in sulfate and ash, like the sky clearing its throat. You let your mind drift, imagining stone temples, wooden huts, crowded markets, shepherds on hillsides, all looking up at the same strange, tinted sky. None of them know anything about sulfur dioxide or radiative forcing. They just see a dim sun and feel the seasons shifting slightly off-beat. Maybe they pray war. Maybe they carve it into stone or tell their children to remember. Meanwhile, this remote ice sheet quietly files away a record of the invisible particles doing the actual dimming work. Sometimes legend is our first clue, May goes on. Stories about long winters, darkened days, summers that felt wrong. We look for the nearest volcanic suspects and then ask the ice, were you dustier then? Did the chemistry of the snow change? If the core say yes, we start connecting dots. It's a strange trio to imagine. A farmer scowling at a stunted field, a scribe scratching a line about a weak, pale sun, and a tiny sulfate spike inside an ice layer halfway around the world, all parts of the same event, separated only by perspective. On a nearby counter, Lena boots up a different workstation and projects another graph onto the wall. This one focuses on a few centuries dotted with known eruptions. Little markers indicate volcanic years, each followed by a dip in reconstructed temperatures. These ash-rich layers help us understand how sensitive the climate is to sudden bursts of stuff in the sky. They're like natural experiments the planet ran long before we started running our own with fossil fuels. You follow one particular eruption marker. In the ice, it's a dark band. In the temperature reconstruction, there's a small but distinct downward wobble after it, a couple of chilly years. On the historical side, people wrote about failed harvests, chilly summers, hunger. The ice itself doesn't look gloomy. It just holds the trace of a slightly darker sky. The cores don't judge, Lena says, echoing May's earlier line. They don't rank events as tragic or mildly annoying. They only say, here is more ash, here is more sulfate, here's how much less sunlight made it through. It's up to us to add the human side of the story. You stand there in the cool glow of the light box, fingers tucked into your sleeves, breathing slowly. In the slices of ice before you, volcanoes you've never seen have left their autographs. Narrow gray stripes, little spikes on a graph, faint chemical fingerprints. In the stories you dimly remember from school, years of failed crops, gloomy summers, legends of angry gods, people were living through what those stripes represent. Outside, the sky above the station is calm, just a wide pale ceiling of cloud, with the sun a smudged coin behind it. No ashes falling here tonight, no sudden volcanic twilight. The snow that drifts down now is mostly clean, just a few traces of modern dust and pollution mixed in. A different kind of signature you'll hear about soon enough. For now, you let yourself simply exist between those two skies, the soft, silent one above the station, and the long record of darker, ash-hazed ones held in the cores. The ice remembers when the world dimmed and cooled for a season or two. It remembers the silent winters that followed, the extra chill that slipped into rivers and soil. It doesn't tell you who shivered by the fire or which village lost its crops, but it keeps the receipts of the sky itself, so that centuries later, in a quiet lab lit by humming bulbs and sleepy screens, you can lay those memories out on a light box and watch them glow. The next time May calls you into the cold lab, her tone is different. Lighter on the jokes, heavier on something you can't quite name. The light box is already on, humming softly, and there's a stack of fresh printouts by her elbow, edges curled from being handled too much. Outside, the wind scrapes along the siding. Inside, the air feels a little like the pause before an important sentence. "You've seen the ancient," she says, sliding a core box onto the table. "Want to meet yourself?" Before you can answer, she's already unlatching the lid. Inside, the ice looks like all the others at first glance. Pale cylinder, faint bands, tiny bubbles. But the label on the side tells a different story. The depth is shallow. The age range measured in mere centuries instead of tens of thousands of years. This one, May taps the tag. Last few hundred years. The top segments include the snow that fell during your grandparents' lifetimes. The very top might include parts per million from the day you were born. She quirks an eyebrow. Congratulations, you're basically a minor character in a very long-running series. She eases the core onto the light box and clicks it on. Under the glow, the layers sharpen. Neat, thin stripes marching along the ice. Winter, summer, in precise, familiar rhythm. Compared to the deeper, compressed sections you saw earlier, these bands look almost roomy, like wide lines in a fresh notebook. We love these upper layers, she says. No intense compression yet. The annual signals are clean. You can almost count the years like tree rings. And in the bubbles, she taps the glimmering pinpricks. You can watch the air change from mostly natural background to, wow, somebody discovered fossil fuels and really ran with it. She leads you over to the gas analyzer setup again. This time, the sample chunks are short pieces from different depths in just this one core. On a nearby screen, a graph is already waiting. Time on the bottom axis, carbon dioxide concentration on the side. The left half is a wavy line, nudging up and down in modest hills. The right half is different. We stitch together data from multiple cores, Antarctic, Greenland, different stations. For the last few thousand years, CO2 wiggles around a fairly narrow band, small ups, small downs. Then, starting a couple of centuries ago, we see this. She taps the graph where the line stops being polite and starts shooting upward. It's not a gentle slope. It's a curve that seems to hesitate for a moment and then take off, like a roller coaster right before the scream. You stare at it. On the left, the background breathing you've gotten used to, glacial cycles, natural variability, the planet's slow rhythm. On the right, a sudden, steep climb, rising far above anything in the earlier record. This is the modern spike, she says quietly. The "you probably won't survive this" part is metaphorical this time, but we do take it seriously. The cores show that for hundreds of thousands of years, CO2 moved between roughly two ranges, low in glacial times, higher in warm intervals. It never approached this level during that entire span. Then, in just a couple of human lifetimes, it jumps. She flips to another plot, methane, doing a smaller but similar trick. Same story, she says. Natural wiggles, then a rapid rise coinciding with industrialization, fossil fuels, large-scale agriculture, deforestation. Different gases, same timing. The ice isn't guessing, it's sampling. You think of the bubbles again, tiny pockets of trapped air. Somewhere near the top of this core are bubbles containing the breath of coal-fired power plants, car exhaust, forest-clearing fires, cement factories, plastic production, planes slicing through the upper air. Also, birthday candles and late-night instant noodles, to be fair. You're in there too. People sometimes ask, how do you know this spike is us? Well, May continues, we answer with a whole buffet of evidence. First, the shape and speed of the climb. Natural changes this large in the past come with certain orbital patterns, ice sheet behaviors, volcanic activity. We don't see those drivers lining up right now. What we do see is a huge amount of carbon dug up from underground and burned by humans. She brings up another graph, this one showing the ratio of carbon isotopes in atmospheric CO2. The line changes direction at the same time emissions ramp up. Fossil carbon has a different isotopic fingerprint than carbon cycling near the surface. As we burn fossil fuels, that fingerprint shows up in the air and in the bubbles. That's why we call it a fingerprint. The ice is basically saying this carbon didn't come from volcanoes or oceans. It came from old stuff you dug up and turned into smoke. On the light box, she sets a thin, near-surface slice of ice under the glow. The bands look almost ordinary. Thin, regular, confidently annual. But under higher magnification, you spot extra smudges of black, traces of nitrates and sulfates from industrial pollution, even tiny spikes of heavy metals from the age of leaded gasoline. If the deep cores read like epic myths, this one reads like a handwritten note pinned to the fridge. You were here. Please clean up after yourself. It's not just gases, May says. We see increased black carbon from industrial soot, changes in acid levels from pollution, even radioactive markers from nuclear tests in the mid-20th century. Those show up as little timestamp lines we can recognize instantly. The Anthropocene, as some people like to say, isn't just a philosophical idea, it's physically written into the ice. You imagine future scientists, centuries from now, sliding this same slice under a different light box. They'll see the same sharp rise, the same dirty smudges, the same isotopic signature. To them, this era will be as distant as Mammoth days are to you. You wonder what kind of stories they'll tell about the people who left such a loud mark in such a short time. May must catch the look on your face because her voice softens. The point of showing you this isn't to paralyze you, it's to remind you that the system is measurable. We can see what's happening, how fast, where it's coming from. The same way the cores let us understand past changes and thresholds, they help us understand the present. We're not walking blindfolded on thin ice. We've got some very detailed maps, drawn by the ice itself. You rest your palms lightly on the table, careful not to jostle the slice. Outside, a plane you can't see passes somewhere high overhead, leaving a thin white trail in the sky. More moisture, more contrails, more tiny contributions to the modern atmosphere drifting above this frozen archive. Inside, the bubbles in the top layers sit quietly, holding the composition of that altered air like a snapshot. The ancient cores you met earlier showed you that Earth can handle big changes, even abrupt ones, over long stretches of time. This newer segment shows you that for the first time, one curious, restless species has learned to reach down into buried carbon and throw it into the sky fast enough to redraw the graphs. The ice doesn't scold, it simply reflects. You look from the slice on the light box to the sharp curve on the screen and back again. Somewhere in that steep line are your own days, bus rides, screen-lit evenings, takeout, lights left on, choices made without thinking too hard about the air outside your window. The ice has no opinion about any of that. It just files it under recent anomalies and waits to see what the next chapters will look like. For now, standing in the quiet lab with May, you feel less like you're visiting a distant alien past and more like you're staring at a mirror pressed gently into your hands by a very old, very patient librarian. The ice has done its part. It remembered. What comes next, it will record just as calmly. The storm arrives in the middle of what should be an ordinary evening, which you take as proof that the weather has absolutely no respect for timing. There's no dramatic thunder roll, no movie-style build-up, just Lena glancing up from her laptop and saying, "Huh," as the wind outside shifts from casual gossip to a steady, insistent shove against the station walls. You drift to the nearest window. A few hours ago, you could still see the horizon, a thin gray line where sky and ice politely shook hands. Now the world has folded in on itself. Snow races past the glass in thick, sideways sheets, erasing distance, direction, and any idea of out there. The exterior lights are nothing but faint smudges in a glowing white blur. If you stepped outside without gear and a safety line, you probably wouldn't survive this. And unlike your usual bedtime exaggerations, that thought feels uncomfortably true. Inside, though, the air is warm and smells faintly of Hassan's soup. The floor shivers as the wind leans on the building, but the structure holds, the way it has through dozens of storms. In the common room, a movie plays at such a low volume, it's basically just comforting mumbling under the roar outside. People move in softer ways, like guests who've decided they're staying the night and don't want to wake the house. "White out," Timo announces, appearing in the doorway with snow still melting in his hair. "Zero visibility! Congratulations, everyone! Our world is now the size of this station and the length of the safety line." "Cozy," Hassan says, ladling soup into bowls. "Trapped on a floating library of ice memories. What could possibly go wrong?" You get an answer about half an hour later. You're walking past the cold lab when the lights flicker. It's brief, just a quick dimming that makes the corridor feel suddenly thin, like the walls took a shallow breath. The light pops back, but you and Lena both stop, eyes drifting up to the ceiling as if you might catch electricity in the act of changing its mind. "Probably nothing," she says, which you're starting to recognize as a summoning spell for absolutely something. The lights flicker again, longer this time. A low beep starts somewhere down the hall, then another higher one joins it. A tiny choir of anxious electronics telling you that nothing has officially become not nothing. The familiar hum of the big freezers shifts by half a tone like a singer sliding off pitch. Lena's already moving. "Power stabilization issue," she calls over her shoulder. "Come on, our ice librarians don't like surprises." You follow her into the cold lab and feel the temperature drop around your face, crisp and clean. Along the wall, the freezers that hold the cores glow with their usual soft status lights, but one panel is flashing amber instead of calm green. The blinking is a little too fast to be friendly. The beeping is polite but insistent, like a librarian who will absolutely shush you if you keep talking. May appears from behind a bench, cardigan sleeves pushed over fingerless gloves. "Grid just hiccuped," she says. "Backup is on, but the voltage is wobbling. If it keeps doing that, temperatures creep up. Cores can crack. We did not go to all this trouble to give 100,000 years of climate history freezer burn." The image lands hard. Those slender cylinders you've carried and stared at. Mammoth air, desert dust, volcanic winters, the sharp modern spike, warming and fracturing because of some sulky wire or half-awake generator. You've only been here a short time, but your brain has quietly filed the cores under things we protect, right alongside your fingers and your phone. "What can I do?" you ask. "Stay close," May says, already at a wall panel. "If we have to shuffle cores between units or into the emergency cold room, we need extra hands." The lights dip again. For a second, the lad becomes a ghost of itself. Edges, shadows, and the bright, nervous blink of the warning panel. Outside, you hear the generators grumble against the strong gust. The vibration rides up through the floor into your boots. When the lights steady, the amber flash on the troubled freezer is faster than before. Timo barrels in, cheeks pink from the cold. "Main generator's getting knocked around," he reports. "She's still running, but output's noisy. I'm going to push some circuits onto the backup diesel, smooth her out a bit." "Freezers first," May says, eyes still on the display. "If the movie dies, so be it. The ice does not." Timo nods, then jerks his chin toward you. "Come on, apprentice breaker flipper, in case my fingers freeze to a switch." You follow him down a narrower corridor that smells like fuel and warm metal. The wind is louder here, a constant low roar separated from you by a few layers of insulation and sheer stubbornness. In the generator room, gauges glow dimly, needles twitching as the main unit hums like someone grinding their teeth in their sleep. Timo opens a panel revealing a tight grid of switches and breakers. We're shedding everything we don't need. Hallway coziness out, time library in. Think of it as giving the ice VIP access. He talks you through the order. Your gloved fingers move carefully, each click of plastic and metal sounding louder than it should. Somewhere above, the wind throws another fistful of snow against the siding, a flat, heavy thud that makes the wall shiver. One by one, parts of the station dim. A storeroom drops into darkness. A hallway softens from bright to twilight. Somewhere, a fan winds down with a tired sigh. You wince briefly for whoever ends up in a suddenly dark bathroom, then promise to look contrite later. Finally, Timo grips a larger switch and throws it. The generator's hum drops half a note, then smooths out into a lower, steadier tone. On the panel, the needles settle into smaller, calmer wobbles. The freezers are on the cleanest feed we've got, he says. Let's see if they've stopped yelling at us. Back in the cold lab, the beeping has already slowed. The amber blink on the freezer display stutters once, twice, then flips back to a steady, comfortable green. The temperature reading holds, unwavering. May watches it for a long, quiet breath, then lets her shoulders fall a few millimeters. Good, she says. We had a wobble, but nothing warmed past the danger line. Nice work, generator whisperer and assistant. Only then do you notice how tense you've been, shoulders tucked up as if you could personally keep the roof on. The freezer's hum settles back into its usual background note, like a room full of sleeping animals relaxing after a loud noise. Inside, the cores lie exactly as they did before the storm. Desert winds, forest fires, volcanic ash, abrupt jumps, and that sharp modern spike, all still locked in their careful cold. Outside, the wind keeps clawing at the station, snow hissing past unseen windows. Inside, the emergency has shrunk down to a handful of logged blips and a new story added to the station's unofficial folklore. Later, in the common room, Lena reenacts the whole thing with extra dramatic beeping and a very serious impression of your breaker flipping face. Hassan slides you an extra cookie for heroic services to the Time Library. Even Timo admits it's good to be reminded that, under all the graphs and jargon, this place is basically a shelter built around some very fragile memories of the planet. You sink into the couch, listening to the muted storm, the low murmur of conversation, and beneath it all the almost invisible thrum of machines keeping the ice exactly where it needs to be. You think of the drill tower biting into stacked winters, of May's light box and its volcanic stripes, of jagged graphs showing abrupt jumps and that sharp modern spike climbing higher than any past line. All of that knowledge, the calm cycles, the abrupt flips, and the warning curves now rests in those humming freezers you just helped protect. Outside, fresh snow keeps falling, adding a new gentle page to the archive under your boots. Inside, you and this small sleepy crew keep watch over the older pages, making sure the planet's long memory stays intact for whoever comes next, on some future night when another storm presses at the walls and someone else leans in to listen to what the ice has to say. Morning arrives so quietly that you only notice it because the station has stopped sounding like it's bracing for a punch. The wind is calmer now, trading last night's angry roar for a low, steady hush against the walls. When you sit up in your bunk, the room is the same narrow rectangle of shelves and hooks and rumpled blankets, but it feels different because you know this is the day you leave. Your duffel waits by the wall, half-packed, like it's been practicing. You move slowly, folding layers you've worn almost every day, tucking in the hat that now smells faintly of soup and diesel and cold air. Each thing you pack seems to carry a little shard of the station with it. The crackle of radio static, the soft hum of freezers, the scratch of pencils over graph paper. Even your socks feel like they've learned something about patience. In the common room, Hassan is already up, stirring something in a pot with the resigned air of a man who accepts that breakfast is his destiny. He slides a mug toward you without looking up. "Departure tea," he says. "Same as regular tea, but I pretend it's more sentimental." You lean against the counter, hands wrapped around the warmth. A small stack of worn playing cards sits on the table, abandoned mid-game. On the wall, the big map of the ice sheet waits, red pin still marking the tiny dot that has been your entire world for these days. Someone has added a sticky note beside it. "Don't forget to come back and visit the ice. It gets lonely." Lena appears, zipping her jacket as she walks. "You've got a little time before the plane comes in," she says. "Visibility's good enough for today's pilot to feel brave. Want a last lap through the time library?" You do. The corridor to the cold lab is familiar now. The scuffs on the floor, the faint smell of metal and frost. When the door opens, that crisp, purposeful chill wraps around you again, not as a threat, but as a greeting. The freezers line the wall like quiet guardians, status lights glowing a calm green. Last night's anxious blinking is gone. The temperatures hold steady, loyal as ever. May stands by an open shelf, sliding a labeled box back into its slot. She glances up and smiles. "Saying goodbye to the old air?" she asks. You step closer to the row of boxes. Somewhere inside these metal walls are all the things the ice has told you. The steady breathing of ice ages, the thin gray signatures of volcanic winters, the faint smudges of desert dust and wildfire soot, the jagged jumps of abrupt climate flips, and the sharp, undeniable upward curve of modern greenhouse gases. Layer after layer of winters and summers, storms and calms, all resting in a temperature-controlled quiet you helped protect during the storm. "Remember your first core?" May says, leaning on the shelf. "You stared at it like it might suddenly start narrating in a British accent." You laugh under your breath. She's not wrong. You've seen what we see every day, that the planet has been changing for a long time, that it can move slowly or very fast, that we're part of the story now, whether we like it or not. The ice doesn't give us instructions, it just gives us context. The rest is up to people who go back home and remember what they saw here. You nod, not trusting your throat to cooperate. The freezers hum softly, steady and indifferent, like they know they'll be here long after this particular goodbye. Lena leads you past the labs, past the room with the graphs still sleeping on their screens, past the row of parkas and boots that have started to look oddly friendly. At the outer door, you pull on your gear one last time. The ritual feels almost ceremonial now. Boots, harness, gloves, hood, goggles. Clip onto the safety line. Take a breath. Outside, the world is bright and clean. All the storm's fury now smoothed into fresh, unbroken snow. The air is sharp enough to make your lungs pay attention, but the sky is open again, pale and high. The drill tent stands a little apart, its fabric snapping softly, the tower inside resting between descents. No cable moving, no metal groaning, just the memory of all the cylinders of time it has already lifted out of the deep. You and Lena walk a short distance onto the open ice, stopping where the surface is still marked with faint tracks, your own paths half filled by new snow. Under your boots, the ice stretches downward, through those stacked winters, past your lifetime, past written history, past the rise and fall of ice sheets, all the way to storms and skies nobody ever saw. You're standing over a very long story, Lena says quietly. You've seen a few pages. That's enough to know it exists. When you go back, you'll hear people talk about weather, about climate, about change. You'll know that somewhere, on a place like this, the ice has receipts. You turn slowly in a small circle, taking in the station, the drill site, the wide, emptied horizon. Somewhere beyond that, cities hum, oceans roll, forests breathe, people argue in comment sections. Up here, the air rests on a memory stack thick enough to hold all of that and more. The distant buzz of engines brushes your ears, at first so faint you think you imagined it. Lena tilts her head. "There's your ride," she says. "Time to stop pretending we live on a tiny moon and rejoin the rest of the planet." The plane lands in a flurry of snow and prop wash, a noisy, practical bird against the quiet expanse. You shoulder your bag, sharing quick hugs and gloved handshakes, Hassan telling you to remember to eat, Timo promising to name the next especially grumpy drill after you, May reminding you that whenever you see a graph, you're allowed to ask where the data came from. At the base of the steps you look back one last time. The station huddles against the ice, chimneys breathing, antennas reaching up like careful questions. The drill tent leans into the wind, and somewhere inside that rectangular building, the freezers hum around their cargo, thin columns of frozen history, waiting patiently for whoever shows up next to ask what the world used to be like. On the plane, as the engines rise and the ground begins to slide away, you watch the station shrink into a bright speck, then into nothing at all. The ice sheet below turns into a vast white page, faintly textured with ridges and shadows. From up here, you can't see the layers, the bubbles, the volcanic stripes, the modern spike. You just see a smooth, quiet blanket. But you know what lies under it. As the plane levels off and the vibration settles into a gentle, steady rumble, your eyes grow heavy. You close them, and in the dim, warm dark behind your eyelids, the humming freezers return, the soft crack of ice in the drill, the glow of graphs on a wall, the tiny bubbles holding whispers of ancient air. You carry them with you now, the long, slow memory of Earth tucked somewhere just behind your own, ready to surface whenever you look up at the sky and wonder what the air around you is quietly keeping track of. The plane moves forward, the ice sleeps below, and you drift, somewhere between them, into a softer kind of listening. The storm has passed, the library is still open, and you are on your way home. The plane's gentle vibration dissolves in your mind, until it's just a soft, steady hum, not so different from the freezers you left behind. That low, constant sound that meant everything was safe. Everything was being kept just the way it needed to be. As you lie there now, in your own room, in your own bed, you can let that hum blend into whatever you hear around you. The whir of a fan, the distant traffic, the quiet ticking of something cooling down, and pretend it's the sound of the ice breathing steadily under a calm sky. You picture the station as no more than a warm dot in a white world. Lights, glowing softly against the long polar night. Inside, the people you met move slowly through their routines, checking gauges, pouring tea, scribbling notes in the margins of printed graphs. Outside, the snow continues to fall in small, unhurried flakes, each one a tiny scrap of air and water drifting down to join the great stack of winters beneath your boots from earlier in the story, building the next thin page in that frozen book. Far below the surface, where you can't see it and never will, old storms sleep in faint, dusty bands. Old eruptions rest in thin gray stripes, and tiny bubbles of ancient air hang motionless in the dark, holding the memory of skies that once arched over mammoths, over early farmers, over people who never knew their fires and fields would leave traces that could be read so long after they were gone. All of it is still there, unchanged by your visit, unchanged by your leaving, solid, patient, and perfectly unconcerned with anything except being exactly what it is. You don't have to solve any of it tonight. You don't have to remember every graph or every explanation. It's enough to know that somewhere, in a place of bright, cold, and humming machines, there are people who listen carefully to what the ice has to say, and that the story of the world's past is being kept safe, one quiet core at a time. That thought can sit beside you like an extra blanket, something light and reassuring that you can pull a little closer as your breathing slows. So you let the images fade gently, like snowflakes melting on a warm glove, the drill tower disappearing into pale air, the map on the wall with its tiny red pin, the glow of the lightbox under a slice of volcanic winter, the soft green lights of freezers standing guard over ancient air. Each one drifts away until all that's left is the simple feeling of being small and safe in a very large, very old world that has carried itself through so many changes and is, for this moment, quiet around you. Your eyelids grow heavier, your thoughts lengthen into softer shapes, and the last thing you hold on to is that low, comforting hum, that sense that somewhere, just out of sight, the ice is still keeping watch, and you are allowed, completely and without apology, to rest. End of story. Sweet dreams.